Episode 700 of CraftLit. Book Talk begins at 17 minutes and 2 seconds. Cranford begins with episode 649. Welcome to CraftLit, the podcast for crafters who love books. My name is Heather Ordover, and I'm podcasting from where the Delaware River meets the Old York Road, New Hope, Pennsylvania. Episode 700, Home Again. This week, we would like to especially thank our lovely patrons, channel members, and premium members at craftlit.com/premium. This week, thank you to Anne Blanton, Shelley Allen, Sharon Stewart, Julie Mead, and Cheryl Ann Schmidt. Thank you so much for your support. We could not do this without you. Well, hello, how are you? I'm home. And while I was gone, they sold the place next door to us, and whoever bought it, I think, is reconstructing the entire inside, the interior of this place. They are moving all over. They have woken me up on a Saturday after Halloween at 8 o'clock. I am not salty at all. I thought that the basement would be safe where I am recording. They're coming in and out of the basement. So if we're going to try and get rid of the noise, if we can't, I apologize in advance. There's not going to be an episode this week if I if I don't just do it now. So I hugely apologize. I had no idea. Life is an adventure, right? Okay, so I'm back from the trip. My mom and I did the road trip across the country from Tucson to upstate New York. We got to see Thing 2. We got to see Aiden in their natural habitat at Pratt Munson in Utica. Utica's great. Had some great food there. Got to see some great places. Got to see my cousin down in Corning. Got to go to the Corning factory and make some glass jewelry, like my own little self at the little torchy thing. It was very fun. I don't have that to show you yet because it had to cool off, but I will be getting that in the mail, and then I will put it in the show notes and on the video version of the episode when I do receive the art that I made. What else happened? We stopped in Ithaca, New York, and went to the Moosewood Cafe restaurant. Huge thumbs up. I mean, I knew the Moosewood cookbook was great. I've had it for 1,000 years. I knew everybody who'd been there had said, oh, it's fabulous. I don't think I was really aware of how good food, healthy food, good food could be until I ate there. Stupendous. I had a salmon and quinoa, and I don't remember what all, because my brain had utterly stopped functioning by that point. But I could walk. And I could also go into a vintage store and spend way too much money on vintage sewing and knitting equipment. And not only that, but in the box of mystery that I got, there was a woman. She must have passed away. This must have been an estate sale because all of the patterns were the same size and all of the patterns were my size. So I bought some actual real vintage patterns, the kind that don't have any printing on them. They just have punch outs in the tissue paper. I got some bone tatting bobbins that I'll be sending to Leanne, who has done such lovely work and shown it off on the YouTube channel when we've been listening to audio for the book. You can send your own crafty videos in. Remember, it doesn't matter if there's noise or if you're talking to kids or whatever. Just don't show any kids' faces, but you can absolutely show hands, and we'll be cutting out the audio so nobody will get unmasked on the internet if you don't want to. But we can publicize your guild or a charity that you like by putting that information under the video when it is showing and also in the show notes. The other thing that was in that box of goodies, along with the really cool patterns, bone crochet hooks, which I'm keeping, some really, really lovely crochet hooks, and a vintage lace. I know there's an actual name for it, like when women wore kerchiefs around their necks and it was just kind of covering up the V dip of their top so that it wasn't too showy. It's a lace handmade lace collar like that. And I was able to tell that it was handmade lace because I was trained by Leanne when we talked, and that episode slash video is available. I know it's on YouTube. I think it's also on our regular feed. So there were some really cool things in there. And there also was a tatting shuttle that looked an awful lot like the one that was in my great-grandmother's sewing kit, which I did not get. I got my grandmother's, not my great-grandmother's. I'd been afraid of tatting for a long time, and you know me, my brain has never met question mark that it didn't want to change into an exclamation point. So I did start watching some YouTube tutorials on tatting, found that I needed to go back and read, or at least look at the pictures on static tutorials, and then I could go back and watch the videos and actually understand what I was looking at. Fascinating thing, tatting, unless I'm mistaken, it's all half hitches going in different directions to create sheep's head knots. So you're using the tatting shuttle to make knots around a core thread that you can then tighten, and it's really, really super smart. Whoever invented it back in the day, they needed to win an award. It's really cool. So I've been playing around with that. It's very small and it doesn't require nearly as much energy as knitting or crocheting or sewing. And the pangolin got finished. It had to come hell or high water because I was dropping it off in Utica, New York, and it was not going to come home with me again. But the girl who Aiden gave it to, she is taking pictures. And once I have those pictures, I will be able to tell you how many hexagons I had to make the pangolin. But I was very happy with how it turned out ultimately. So in that respect, that's a good thing. The other thing my mom and I were able to do in the early part of our drive across the country was we spent the night in Hatch, New Mexico. Hatch, New Mexico is famous for chilies. They grow all the chilies, the best chilies. It's great chili country. You can see the fields of chili like going off in the distance. It's really beautiful. You will have people tell you, my father certainly did, that there is nowhere to stay in Hatch, New Mexico. And so when they have the chili festival, people wind up staying in all sorts of other cities within half an hour of Hatch. My mom and I found the one place. It is an event center and inn, and it has little rooms that you could stay in. It's almost like a hostel in the main part because that was a monastery. And then in the back, there is a casita. It sleeps 5. It was just the 2 of us. We had a kitchen, we had a refrigerator, we had hot and cold water. It was fantastic. And then the next morning, after a really good night's sleep, we were able to go into Hatch, get some little goodies for people that we love, and I was able to get some good pictures of chili peppers, which is what I used for my postcards for my Patreon supporters who are at that level. They get a postcard every month. I can only do 10 of them, and I think we're at 9 so far who've signed up for it. So yeah, they take a little bit of time, but boy, was it worth it. I'm really happy with the way the chilies came out. But after that, after Hatch, New Mexico, my mom was really excited to go to Santa Fe, which is now a big, big city. I remember it being very, very small 40 years ago. So it's grown, unsurprisingly. But then we went another, I think it was hour north of Santa Fe up to Georgia O'Keeffe's home. If you ever are in the area, and I don't care if you are a huge fan of Georgia O'Keeffe or not, if you have an opportunity to, please go. I know Georgia O'Keeffe in very general, like poster print ways. I knew who she was ish. I knew where she was from ish. I knew New Mexico. I was pretty firm about. Wow. Just everything about her home. Wow. At one point, somebody asked the question that I wanted to ask when we were in her living room. And this guy said, so was she friends with Frank Lloyd Wright? Because this looks a lot like Taliesin in Phoenix, Arizona. And the tour guide is like, yeah, don't say that out loud here. Because when she was alive, if Georgia O'Keeffe heard you say, for like the beginning of Frank in Frank Lloyd Wright, she would cut you off and say, we have nothing to do with each other. So So her place does. It really looks a lot like Frank Lloyd Wright's style. It's very clean. It's very modern. It's got, 3-foot thick adobe walls and like a 2-foot thick roof that was not bug resistant. So there are stories about the bugs filtering down. She was a hoot. She had an amazing garden. It is still irrigated the same way that it was. They get water every Tuesday morning between 9 and 11. They open up a sluice gate. It comes in. They can open and close other sluice gates to aim the water where they want it to be. It's all just little adobe brick or stone. It's probably stone. Irrigation trenches that are about, I don't know, 8 inches wide at the bottom, maybe a foot wide at the top because they bunch out. And then there's little sluice cases all over the place. Sluice gateses, Heather, sluice gates all over the place. I mean, apples, vegetables, everything. She cooked out of her garden for the most part. And there is a cookbook, a Georgia O'Keeffe cookbook. It's all fairly simple, straightforward stuff. But especially for a new cook, it's not a bad way to start cooking for yourself when you are thinking about learning skills and things. So that was a lot of fun. But the best part, the last part I'm going to share about the trip, the last thing that the tour guide said, he said, "You guys are a really fun group, and I'm going to tell you the funniest Georgia O'Keeffe story we have." Over time, various people would come to visit her in this home. This is not Ghost Ranch. This is the other one. She had the Ghost Ranch home, which is famous because it is called the Ghost Ranch, and that sticks. And then she had a home in Abiquiú, and it is spelled, I'm looking at it to make sure I get this right, Abiquiu, with a little accent mark over the last U. That was her, I think that was her winter and spring home. She spent 2 seasons of the month at each place, and now I can't remember which. Doesn't really matter because she's not there right now. But people used to come and visit her in Abiquiú all the time. One of those people who actually was a group of people, Andy Warhol and his entourage, or a small portion of his entourage, came to visit and loved it. Everything was great. And she was leading him and his team through from her studio. I'm trying to remember the order of operations. There's studio, kitchen, pantries, bathroom, and bedroom. And that's all one block. And then there's another building block where the dining room and the living room and all the gardening stuff is. So Andy Warhol's people were being led out from the kitchen through to the outside. You go through the kitchen, which has a couch in it, which is, yes, every kitchen needs a nice couch. And then through the pantries where the refrigerator is, and then out. As Georgia O'Keeffe is waving goodbye to everybody, Andy Warhol hung back. So he's the last one to come out, says his thanks, says goodbye, leaves. Georgia O'Keeffe's housekeeper runs up to her and says, "I just wanted to let you know, the very odd man with the white hair, when you were leading him through, he stayed back and he took a marker pen out of his pocket and he drew something very odd on your refrigerator." And of course, this was an Andy Warhol thing. He would leave a cartoon of himself and his signature randomly on people's things in their homes. It would be worth a lot of money, right? The next words out of the housekeeper's mouth were, "But don't worry about it. I got to it before the ink dried and I cleaned it all off." I thought that stuff only happened to me. It happened to Georgia O'Keeffe too. So, oh man. All right. Businessy things. As I was leaving on the trip, I found out that Libsyn had done what I asked them not to do, and they had made all of the premium episodes available for free to everyone on iTunes and everywhere. We fixed that. But if you got a chance to listen to some premium audio between when that happened and when we fixed it, yay. Now you know what the premium stuff sounds like. We also released the first chapter of Moby Dick as a freebie, as a bonus episode for everybody. That we did without any extra fanfare or anything. I wasn't in a place where I could record any kind of an intro or anything like that. So if you were confused about that one, now you know what that was about. I told you that we were working on other solutions for the premium episodes, and we have found one, a real one, that will allow you to sign up for premium episodes through a service that handles a whole mess load of other shows as well. And you can sign up so that you can listen on the podcaster, and you can sign up to listen on the podcatcher of your choice. So if you like Shifty Jelly Pocket Casts, you can listen there. If you like the Apple default podcast player, you can listen there. If you're on an Android and you have an Android-based, you can listen there. You can listen online. You're going to be able to listen anywhere to premium as well as regular audio. The subscription to the regular CraftLit feed, what you're listening to now, will not change. That's going to stay the way it is forever and ever. The website is still going to do what it's doing. It's going to have the premium, and it's going to have the free show notes and episodes all embedded there. This new service, though, I think it's going to give us the opportunity to do some things that we've been wanting to do for a long time and couldn't. But it is also, I think, going to eventually, and we're not going to do it super fast, but eventually it will wind up replacing Patreon, because I know listening to episodes on Patreon is really not particularly easy or pleasant. Apparently, I was not the first podcaster to mention this to the new service that we will be working with. They said that's actually how they started, was migrating people and their groups from Patreon over. So that's way down in the future. First, we're going to solve the premium feed problem and deal with that. So that's coming. But today we go back to Mr. Harrison's confession. And today we're just doing one chapter. I don't have enough brain to do much more than that. We're doing chapter 14. This is another one of those chess pieces, kind of set. It's the setup before the spike. So we're setting things up for the next round of trouble that Mr. Harrison is going to be confessing to. He's been left a legacy. He mentioned this way back at the beginning of the book, that there was money that was coming in for him, a legacy, like a monetary gift from somebody who passed away. He was waiting for it to come in. It's £500. And I looked that up, and the most consistent, cross-reference chart thing that I found was that £500 back then in 1850 would be somewhere around, and probably more than, £70,000 today. So it was a chunk of change, and pretty awesome. And as a consequence, you're going to hear things like Mr. Harrison's going to mention buying flowers for Sopie, and he's very specific. He says camellias. That's because camellias at the time were like gold. They were imported from France and Italy, I think. They were expensive, and he's getting them in February. So right now, there is no food that's in season. There are no flowers that are in season. As far as I know, I don't think there are any flowers that are blooming in February at that high a latitude. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. 206-350-1642 or heather@craftlit.com. But it's important that it's February. Somebody else is going to make a comment that'll make you go, wait, what? And it's fresh food would have been very expensive at this time. Fresh food of any sort. So there's some good Gaskell humor in today's chapter. Yeah, I don't want to spoil any of the jokes. They're subtle, they're Gaskell. They're light. They have a light touch. They're very easy. They're very sweet. We find out more about Miss Bullock. Don't forget, Miss Bullock is the girl that the Bullocks are trying to foist onto poor Mr. Harrison. You will now be able to like her as much as I do. I just do. She reminds me of a character Eugenie in The Count of Monte Cristo. By the way, Overly Sarcastic Productions did a summary. It's like a 40-minute summary of The Count of Monte Cristo. That is, it is excellent. And if you aren't sure that you want to commit to The Count of Monte Cristo, you want to make sure that the story sounds like it's worth a year and a half of episodes, watch her, and you'll be able to tell. But yeah, Miss Bullock reminds me of Eugenie, who was the girl who had her special girlfriend that she ran off with while she was dressed in men's clothing. And for that, I love Alexandre Dumas. There is a accident that happens, and it's John Brownker. John Brownker is the village handyman carpenter guy. He falls, he hurts his wrist. It is bad. They start talking about lockjaw, which means that Elizabeth Gaskell was not grossing you out on purpose. For him to be at risk of lockjaw, it means that whatever he did to his wrist could have given him tetanus. And tetanus still has like a 10 to 20%. What I read today was it still has like a 10 to 20% kill rate if an unvaccinated person gets tetanus. So if somebody says, your tetanus booster needs to be re-upped, your response is yes, please, because holy cow, it takes a little while for lockjaw to set in. Once it does, it's bad. It's really bad. And once tetanus starts doing nerve damage, it can be stopped, but it can't be reversed. So you can imagine, in a world without antibiotics, in a world where they're not even really solid about germ theory, I don't think that comes in for a little bit yet, it would be bad. It'd be really bad. And remember, Elizabeth Gaskell had, was it her brother-in-law who was a doctor? She did have people in and around her who she could talk to and ask, what's a good thing for me to have happen to this guy that would put him at risk? We are in 1850. We are just starting to separate from the, hey, that broke, let's saw it off response, and the, hey, that's bad and gooey. I think I have some treatments that might be able to save your appendage. And what we're seeing right now is that splitting between the old ways and the new ways. And again, Gaskell would have actually known what she was talking about when it comes to these attitudes about medicine at the time. In today's chapter, we are also going to have more proof that humans just haven't changed. We like to think that everyone back in the day was all sweetness and light and so well behaved and didn't say horrible things about other people, and we are wrong, clearly, because if Elizabeth Gaskell is telling us some of the horrible things that people say, she's not going to just randomly do that. She's heard it. So there's going to be some of that going on. Mr. Morgan, the other doctor, is going to once again impress us by being complicated. Yeah, we'll talk about that more on the flip side. I really do. I have come to really like Mr. Morgan on this read round. Miss Horsman is going to pop up again. Miss Horsman is the one at the picnic who Mr. Harrison went over and offered his arm because he noticed she was a little bit lame. And she said, "Don't you think that you should be taking Miss Bullock?" So she's the snappy maiden member of the society. More snappy than Mrs. Tompkinson. And just a reminder, if you're dealing with the wrist and you're dealing with the bones that come off the wrist, you have your radius, you have your ulna, you have all the wrist bones, you have your carpal tunnel, carpals, metacarpals. Those are all the wrist bones. If you start talking about like tibias, fibias, femurs, you are not talking about the arm, you are talking about the leg. Just so you know. And I think that's everything you need for today's chapter. It's about 20 minutes long. It's not too bad. But I do have some things to talk to you about on the flip side. So let's listen to Neil Badrian reading us chapter 14 of Mr. Harrison's Confessions by Elizabeth Gaskell. Here we go.
Section 6 of Mr. Harrison's Confessions by Elizabeth Gaskell. Recording by Noel Badrian. Chapter 14. On the whole, things went on smoothly. Mr. Holden's legacy came in just about this time, and I felt quite rich. £500 would furnish the house, I thought, when Mrs. Rose left and Sopie came. I was delighted to imagine that Sopie perceived the difference of my manner to her from what it was to anyone else, and that she was embarrassed and shy in consequence, but not displeased with me for it. All was so flourishing that I went about on wings instead of feet. We were very busy, without having anxious cares. My legacy was paid into Mr. Bullock's hands, who united a little banking business to his profession of law. In return for his advice about investments, which I never meant to take, having a more charming, if less profitable, mode in my head, I went pretty frequently to teach him his agricultural chemistry. I was so happy in Sophy's blushes that I was universally benevolent, and desirous of giving pleasure to everyone. I went, at Mrs. Bullock's general invitation, to dinner there one day unexpectedly, but there was such a fuss of ill-concealed preparation consequent upon my coming, that I never went again. Her little boy came in with an audibly given message from the cook to ask if this was the gentleman as she was to send in the best dinner service and dessert for. I looked deaf, but determined never to go again. Miss Bullock and I, meanwhile, became rather friendly. We found out that we mutually disliked each other, and were contented with the discovery. If people are worth anything, this sort of non-liking is a very good beginning of friendship. Every good quality is revealed naturally and slowly, and is a pleasant surprise. I found out that Miss Bullock was sensible and even sweet-tempered, when not irritated by her stepmother's endeavours to show her off. But she would sulk for hours after Mrs. Bullock's offensive praise of her good points. And I never saw such a black passion as she went into when she suddenly came into the room when Mrs. Bullock was telling me of all the offers she had had. My legacy made me feel up to extravagance. I scoured the country for a glorious nosegay of camellias, which I sent to Sopie on Valentine's Day. I durst not add a line, but I wished the flowers could speak, and tell her how I loved her. I called on Miss Tyrrell that day. Miss Caroline was more simpering and affected than ever, and full of allusions to the day. "Do you affix much sincerity of meaning to the little gallantries of this day, Mr. Harrison?" asked she in a languishing tone. I thought of my camellias, and how my heart had gone with them into Sophie's keeping, and I told her I thought one might often take advantage of such a time to hint at feelings one dared not fully express. I remembered afterwards the forced display she made, after Miss Tyrrell left the room, of a Valentine, but I took no notice at the time. My head was full of Sophy. It was on that very day that John Brownker, the gardener to all of us who had small gardens to keep in order, fell down and injured his wrist severely. I don't give you the details of the case because they would not interest you, being too technical. If you have any curiosity, you will find them in the Lancet of August in that year. We all liked John, and this accident was felt like a town's misfortune. The gardens, too, just wanted doing up. Both Mr. Morgan and I went directly to him. It was a very awkward case, and his wife and children were crying sadly. He himself was in great distress at being thrown out of work. He begged us to do something that would cure him speedily, as he could not afford to be laid up, with 6 children depending on him for bread. We did not say much before him, but we both thought the arm would have to come off, and it was his right arm. We talked it over when we came out of the cottage. Mr. Morgan had no doubt of the necessity. I went back at dinner-time to see the poor fellow. He was feverish and anxious. He had caught up some expression of Mr. Morgan's in the morning, and had guessed the measures we had in contemplation. He bade his wife leave the room, and spoke to me by myself. "If you please, sir, I'd rather be done for at once than have my arm taken off, and be a burden to my family. I'm not afraid of dying, but I could not stand being a cripple for life, eating bread, and not able to earn it." The tears were in his eyes with earnestness. I had all along been more doubtful about the necessity of the amputation than Mr. Morgan. I knew the improved treatment in such cases. In his days there was much more of the rough and ready in surgical practice, so I gave the poor fellow some hope. In the afternoon I met Mr. Bullock. "So you're to try your hand at an amputation to-morrow, I hear. Poor John Brownker. I used to tell him he was not careful enough about his ladders. Mr. Morgan is quite excited about it. He asked me to be present and see how well a man from Guy's could operate. He says he is sure you'll do it beautifully." "Pah, no such sights for me, thank you." Ruddy Mr. Bullock went a shade or two paler at the thought. Curious how professionally a man views these things. Here's Mr. Morgan, who has been all along as proud of you as if you were his own son, absolutely rubbing his hands at the idea of this crowning glory, this feather in your cap. He told me just now he knew he had always been too nervous to be a good operator, and had therefore preferred sending for White from Chesterton. But now anyone might have a serious accident who liked, for you would always be at hand. I told Mr. Bullock I really thought we might avoid the amputation, but his mind was preoccupied with the idea of it, and he did not care to listen to me. The whole town was full of it. That is a charm in a little town. Everybody is so sympathetically full of the same events. Even Miss Horsman stopped me to ask after John Brownker with interest, but she threw cold water upon my intention of saving the arm. As for the wife and family, we'll take care of them. Think what a fine opportunity you have of showing off, Mr. Harrison." That was just like her, always ready with her suggestions of ill-natured or interested motives. Mr. Morgan heard my proposal of a mode of treatment by which I thought it possible that the arm might be saved. "I differ from you, Mr. Harrison," said he. "I regret it, but I differ in toto from you. Your kind heart deceives you in this instance. There is no doubt that amputation must take place. Not later than to-morrow morning, I should say. I have made myself at liberty to attend upon you, sir. I shall be happy to officiate as your assistant. Time was when I should have been proud to be principal, but a little trembling in my arm incapacitates me." I urged my reasons upon him again, but he was obstinate. He had, in fact, boasted so much of my acquirements as an operator that he was unwilling I should lose this opportunity of displaying my skill. He could not see that there would be greater skill evinced in saving the arm, nor did I think of this at the time. I grew angry at his old-fashioned narrow-mindedness, as I thought it, and I became dogged in my resolution to adhere to my own course. We parted very coolly, and I went straight off to John Brownker to tell him I believed that I could save the arm if he would refuse to have it amputated. When I calmed myself a little, before going in and speaking to him, I could not help acknowledging that we should run some risk of locked jaw. But, on the whole, and after giving most earnest conscientious thought to the case, I was sure that my mode of treatment would be best. He was a sensible man. I told him the difference of opinion that existed between Mr. Morgan and myself. I said there might be some little risk attending the non-amputation, but that I should guard against it, and I trusted that I should be able to preserve his arm. "Under God's blessing," said he reverently. I bowed my head. I don't like to talk too frequently of the dependence which I always felt on that holy blessing as to the result of my efforts, but I was glad to hear that speech of John's, because it showed a calm and faithful heart, and I had almost certain hopes of him from that time. We agreed that he should tell Mr. Morgan the reason of his objections to the amputation, and his reliance on my opinion. I determined to recur to every book I had relating to such cases, and to convince Mr. Morgan, if I could, of my wisdom. Unluckily, I found out afterwards that he had met Miss Horsman in the time that intervened before I saw him again at his own house that evening, and she had more than hinted that I shrunk from performing the operation, for very good reasons, no doubt. She had heard that the medical students in London were a bad set, and were not remarkable for regular attendance in the hospitals. She might be mistaken, but she thought it was, perhaps, quite as well poor John Brownker had not his arm cut off by— Was there not such a thing as mortification coming on after a clumsy operation? It was perhaps only a choice of deaths. Mr. Morgan had been stung at all this. Perhaps I did not speak quite respectfully enough. I was a good deal excited. We only got more and more angry with each other, though he, to do him justice, was as civil as could be all the time, thinking that thereby he concealed his vexation and disappointment. He did not try to conceal his anxiety about poor John. I went home weary and dispirited. I made up and took the necessary applications to John, and promising to return with the dawn of day, I would fain have stayed, but I did not wish him to be alarmed about himself. I went home, and resolved to sit up and study the treatment of similar cases. Mrs. Rose knocked at the door. "Come in," said I sharply. She said she had seen I had something on my mind all day, and she could not go to bed without asking if there was nothing she could do. She was good and kind, and I could not help telling her a little of the truth. She listened pleasantly, and I shook her warmly by the hand, thinking that though she might not be very wise, her good heart made her worth a dozen keen, sharp, hard people like Miss Horsman. When I went at daybreak, I saw John's wife for a few minutes outside the door. She seemed to wish her husband had been in Mr. Morgan's hands rather than mine, but she gave me as good an account as I dared to hope for of the manner in which her husband had passed the night. This was confirmed by my own examination. When Mr. Morgan and I visited him together later on in the day, John said what we had agreed upon the day before, and I told Mr. Morgan openly that it was by my advice that amputation was declined. He did not speak to me till we had left the house. Then he said, "Now, sir, from this time I consider this case entirely in your hands. Only remember, the poor fellow has a wife and 6 children. In case you come round to my opinion, remember that Mr. White could come over, as he has done before for the operation." So Mr. Morgan believed I declined operating because I felt myself incapable. Very well. I was much mortified. An hour after we parted I received a note to this effect: "Dear Sir, I will take the long round to-day to leave you at liberty to attend to Brownker's case, which I feel to be a very responsible one. J. Morgan." This was kindly done. I went back as soon as I could to John's cottage. While I was in the inner room with him, I heard the Miss Tomkinsons' voices outside. They had called to inquire. Miss Tomkinson came in, and evidently was poking and snuffling about. Mrs. Brownker told her that I was within, and within I resolved to be till they had gone. "What is this close smell?" asked she. "I am afraid you are not cleanly. Cheese? Cheese in this cupboard? No wonder there is an unpleasant smell. Don't you know how particular you should be about being clean when there is illness about? Mrs. Brownker was exquisitely clean in general, and was piqued at these remarks. "If you please, ma'am, I could not leave John yesterday to do any housework, and Jenny put the dinner things away. She is but 8 years old." But this did not satisfy Miss Tomkinson, who was evidently pursuing the course of her observations. "Fresh butter, I declare! Well now, Mrs. Brownker, do you know I don't allow myself fresh butter at this time of the year? How can you save, indeed, with such extravagance?" "Please, ma'am," answered Mrs. Brownker, "you'd think it strange if I was to take such liberties in your house as you are taking here." I expected to hear a sharp answer. No, Miss Tomkinson liked true plain speaking. The only person in whom she would tolerate roundabout ways of talking was her sister. "Well, that's true," she said. "Still, you must not be above taking advice. Fresh butter is extravagant at this time of the year. However, you're a good kind of woman, and I've a great respect for John. Send Jenny for some broth as soon as he can take it. Come, Caroline, we have got to go on to Williams's." But Miss Caroline said that she was tired, and would rest where she was till Miss Tomkinson came back. I was a prisoner for some time, I found. When she was alone with Mrs. Brownker, she said, "You must not be hurt by my sister's abrupt manner. She means well. She has not much imagination or sympathy, and cannot understand the distraction of mind produced by the illness of a worshipped husband." I could hear the loud sigh of commiseration which followed this speech. Mrs. Brownker said, "Please, ma'am, I don't worship my husband. I would not be so wicked." "Goodness! You don't think it wicked, do you? For my part, if I should worship, I should adore him." I thought she need not imagine such improbable cases. But sturdy Mrs. Brownker said again, "I hope I know my duty better. I've not learnt my commandments for nothing. I know whom I ought to worship." Just then the children came in, dirty and unwashed, I have no doubt, and now Miss Caroline's real nature peeped out. She spoke sharply to them, and asked them if they had no manners, little pigs as they were, to come brushing against her silk gown in that way. She sweetened herself again, and was as sugary as love when Miss Tomkinson returned for her, accompanied by one whose voice, like winds in summer sighing, I knew to be my dear Sophy's. She did not say much, but what she did say, and the manner in which she spoke, was tender and compassionate in the highest degree, and she came to take the 4 little ones back with her to the vicarage, in order that they might be out of their mother's way. The older 2 might help at home. She offered to wash their hands and faces, and when I emerged from my inner chamber after the Miss Tomkinsons had left, I found her with a chubby child on her knees, bubbling and sputtering against her white wet hand, with a face bright, rosy, and merry under the operation. Just as I came in, she said to him, "There, Jemmy, now I can kiss you with this nice clean face." She coloured when she saw me. I liked her speaking, and I liked her silence. She was silent now, and I loved all the better. I gave my directions to Mrs. Brownker, and hastened to overtake Sophy and the children, but they had gone round by the lanes, I suppose, for I saw nothing of them. I was very anxious about the case. At night I went again. Miss Horsman had been there. I believe she was really kind among the poor, but she could not help leaving a sting behind her everywhere. She had been frightening Mrs. Brownker about her husband, and been, I have no doubt, expressing her doubts of my skill, for Mrs. Brownker began, "Oh, please, sir, if you'll only let Mr. Morgan take off his arm, I will never think the worse of you for not being able to do it." I told her it was from no doubt of my own competency to perform the operation that I wished to save the arm, but that he himself was anxious to have it spared. Ay, bless him, he frets about not earning enough to keep us if he's crippled. But, sir, I don't care about that. I would work my fingers to the bone, and so would the children. I'm sure we'd be proud to do for him and keep him. God bless him. It would be far better to have him only with one arm than to have him in the churchyard. Miss Horsman says—" "Confound Miss Horsman," said I. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," said her well-known voice behind me. She had come out, dark as it was, to bring some old linen to Mrs. Brownker; for, as I said before, she was very kind to all the poor people of Duncombe. I beg your pardon, for I really was sorry for my speech, or rather that she had heard it. "There is no occasion for any apology," she replied, drawing herself up and pinching her lips into a very venomous shape. John was doing pretty well, but of course the danger of lockjaw was not over. Before I left, his wife entreated me to take off the arm. She wrung her hands in her passionate entreaty. "Spare him to me, Mr. Harrison," she implored. Miss Horsman stood by. It was mortifying enough, but I thought of the power which was in my hands, as I firmly believed, of saving the limb, and I was inflexible. You cannot think how pleasantly Mrs. Rose's sympathy came in on my return. To be sure, she did not understand one word of the case which I detailed to her, but she listened with interest, and, as long as she held her tongue, I thought she was really taking it in. But her first remark was as malapropos as could be. "You are anxious to save the tibia. I see completely how difficult that will be. My late husband had a case exactly similar, and I remember his anxiety. But you must not distress yourself too much, my dear Mr. Harrison. I have no doubt it will end well." I knew she had no grounds for this assurance, and yet it comforted me. However, as it happened, John did fully as well as I could hope. Of course he was long in rallying his strength, and, indeed, sea air was evidently so necessary for his complete restoration, that I accepted with gratitude Mrs. Rose's proposal of sending him to Highport for a fortnight or 3 weeks. Her kind generosity in this matter made me more desirous than ever of paying her every mark of respect and attention. End of section 6.
Okay, before we get to the last line with Mrs. Rose, the way the whole town is like so excited there's going to be an amputation is just horrifying to me on the one hand, but it's also what an old boyfriend of mine used to call RPS, or residual pinhead slowing, on the highways in Los Angeles when there's a car accident and everybody has to slow down to see, because that's the most interesting thing that's happened ever. And then along with the residual pinhead slowing side of things, there's also the, aren't you excited to get to take his arm off? Which is so ghoulish, but again, also, it's impossible not to watch the train wreck that's happening in front of you. It's the human thing. But what I really thought was interesting was that Miss Horsman and then everyone, the assumption for why he might not want to do the amputation of the carpenter's arm, that the only viable explanation for that must be that he just doesn't think he can do it, that he's afraid. He's a little scaredy cat. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because we see that kind of behavior on the internet all the time. Somebody will come up, they will explain themselves, their thinking, their attitude, why they're doing what they're doing, and people will go, yeah, right, and just ascribe the worst motives to the other person ever. And yeah, we have not, more proof we just have not changed at all. I did love that Mr. Morgan took the long rounds so that Mr. Harrison would have time to devote to caring for Mr. Brownker. I also loved that we got to see a scene where the Miss Tompkins and Caroline go into the Brownker homes to be nice and check on him. It is a visit. And then Miss Tompkinson is like, wow, what is that smell? And she really starts griping at poor Mrs. Brownker, who's a little distracted right now. And she stands up for herself. Well, the daughter, the 8-year-old put things away last night. So can you cut me some slack, lady? But that doesn't stop her. The next time when Miss Tompkinson comes back with even more, the lady of the house, her response is, you'd have a problem if I came in and did this to you. And as far as I can tell, they are not on equal footing. I think there's even a comment that's made about there being a class disparity here. So for her to come back at Miss Tompkinson is either she has no F's left to give, she is exhausted, she is scared, she is done, or people actually did respond. She's polite enough about her response, but she is also very clear, this is unacceptable behavior. Hello? That just made me so happy. We rarely see things like that, actual points of conflict that are not on the level of, the conflict in the Three Musketeers. It's like the cardinal and the king. We see those conflicts all the time, but to see something as everyday domestic, but also very, very real, I just found really awesome. So there was that. And the reason I made the point about it being February and Valentine's Day is because at first when Miss Tompkinson said, you have cheese and butter, this is not a clean thing to do. Why are you doing it? But then she switches on the reasoning behind not having butter. And it is, I thought initially, oh, it must be hot. That's why you don't want to have cheese in the cupboard. No, it is in the wintertime, everything's more expensive. So cheese, yes, you don't want it in the cupboard smelling up the place, but butter is too expensive. So I thought that was interesting. I also thought what we see from Miss Caroline is interesting because she starts off with the being really kind. Oh, please, don't hate my sister for being so harsh. She really means it well. And I'm sure that I'm sure that you worship your husband. So we know Miss Caroline has no realistic image of what grown-up life would be were she married. And Mrs. Brownker does a nice job of trying to disabuse her of that notion. And again, push back, but politely. But boy, then Miss Caroline turns on a dime when those kids come in. And wow, I was really glad Mr. Harrison got to hear that from the other room. But also I was really glad we got to see that because it's easy to feel like she's being kind of dunked on. And I think she kind of deserves some of the dunking. I also loved that Mr. Harrison's not sorry. He's sorry for being caught. I love that. I love that. I love Sopie. Sopie's so sweet with the kids. And then the last thing to know is pretty much the last line of the chapter is Mrs. Rose was going to send them to the Brownkers to the beach. So remember, she has some amount of money. And she is a good, kind woman. She may not know Atibia from Radius or Ulna, but she's a good lady. She wants to be of use. And the beach thing is going to come into play next week. All right. So I hope you are well. I hope you take care. I hope you all are safe. I have family in Evanston. We are concerned. Their school closed early. It's scary. So I hope you are safe and well and continue to be so until I talk to you next week. Take care. Have a good one. Bye. Hi, it's Heather from the future. And I realized I went through that entire episode without mentioning the fact that this is episode 700, which is kind of wild. We're not doing a big deal for this because next year is our 20th anniversary, and so we're going to be doing more for that. But yeah, 700 episodes of CraftLit. Someday I have to actually sit down and count for realsies, count the books. I know it's more than 35 books that we've done so far over the last 19 and a half years. But thanks for sticking with me. Thank you for listening. And if you are interested in joining in the 2025 Holiday Bookmark Exchange, please follow the link in the show notes or on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube. The dates for the Bookmark Exchange are: we start the sign up on November 1st. The deadline for the sign up is November 21st, just so we get our bookmarks made in time. Tracy is going to send names out to people on November 24th, and then plan to mail out your bookmarks by or before December 6th. That will guarantee that you both can send and receive a bookmark before Christmas. And along with that, if you are willing to ship internationally, please let us know on the form, and that way we can hook you up with people who live somewhere else other than North America, which is, a lot of CraftLit people. All right, that's it for me from the future. Thank you. You can find show notes for this episode and links to other episodes at craftlit.com. CraftLit also appears anywhere you can get a podcast: iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and on, including its own dedicated app. There are lots of ways to support CraftLit, from patreon.com/craftlit to craftlit.com memberships and channel memberships on YouTube. You can find out more details at craftlit.com/premium. And as always, thank you for your support. And remember, if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can turn one on.